Welcome, welcome. We'll get started here in a second. I just want to give people time to get in. Just enjoy these royalty-free jams from YouTube. And I think we'll get to this soon. Jams. We'll get started right here in a second. We'll be starting right here in a minute, guys. Today we'll be getting into this acrylic painting that you see right before you. I've been working on it now for 2 weeks, just here and there amidst the day job. So hopefully we can get to work on it here in a second. And I'm going to be working on some foliage today. And hopefully we can get the rest of this tree in the foreground done. Pretty excited about it. I like this Pink Floyd sounding stuff. I like it. All right. We'll go ahead and bring this volume back down. Just keep it a little bit in the background. I know some of these songs are a little louder than others, so these are all just royalty-free songs that we're going to be playing in the background. I just don't like the ambiance of sitting here in the quietness, so if you guys don't mind, if it gets a little loud at times, we'll work on it, but I'm going to go ahead and start getting at it. I hope we got a good clear shot of the painting. I know the chat might pop up in front of it there, but it shouldn't be too bad. I'm going to sit right here. Alrighty. What's up, guys? So, like I said, I've been working on this painting for a couple weeks now. And it's just been in my spare time. It was something I was inspired to do partially because of the fact that I haven't painted in a while. I've been working mostly with color pencils for the past year, and I decided I wanted to sit down and paint something. I also was inspired because my father's birthday was yesterday, and he passed away in 2005, and I've been reflecting on our relationship a lot recently, so hopefully we can get into a little bit of that and my experiences in my life, and we can talk about that and about how that works with painting. That's kind of my goal. I'm not going to be able to keep up with the chat because we're going to be kind of involved here, but I wanted to go through first and talk about the different materials that we're planning on using and I have been using in this. So when I started this out, I just sketched it out as just a plain canvas from, I believe this one is actually just from a Walmart. It wasn't very expensive. It probably came in a 2 or 3 pack even. But I'm not too worried about what material I'm painting on, as long as I know it's going to stay for long enough for somebody to enjoy it in their lifetime and for me to get that story out of my head. So started sketching that out, and then wanted to decide on a angle of attack, and I chose that I wanted to get rid of some of these little bottles of acrylic paint. I have a bunch of little bottles. Some of them are half empty, some of them were dried out, so I chose to grab some of these little paint tubes and make my palette out of that, use up some of those paints. These aren't high body or anything like that. They're just simple like 10 and 24 pack colors that you would get as a starter kit. They were things that I've had lying around amidst my larger bottles and such, so I wanted to get rid of that. I chose a simple palette that I would for most outdoors. It starts off pretty simply. We can look at these. I'll go ahead and bring up a palette here. I'm just using these little simple dollar palettes, but they're perfect for me to be sitting here and working at the station. I can bring up a palette knife, take what I need, throw it on a bigger palette, which in fact I've been using just some simple foam plates recently, giving me a little more room to move things around on the palette and get a better result, better mixing and color blending before I apply things on there. Trying to fit it on a smaller palette has been a little more difficult for me. So I went in here first. I have some burnt umber here. This is lemon yellow on one side of it, and on the other side, I believe, is a cadmium yellow medium, and then I have a full medium yellow. This is a phthalo green, a sap green, and a light cerulean blue. These yellows have been really helpful in getting in these colors in the trees. The light cerulean I didn't use in the lake. I used a light blue, and actually I used some of this golden heavy-bodied acrylic. Also, I used that to get these wider spots in the clouds up there. These heavy-bodied acrylics will stick on top of anything and give you a really almost textural application. So I did that. The rest of these are, like I said, I think most of these are either Roller Downy or I can't even remember what this company is. It's some Chinese acrylic company. It was actually a gift from my grandmother for Christmas, so why not make something great with it. The Scarlet was used in some of these flowers in the back. I'm thinking about also adding some flowers over here next to these bluebells and some other flowers that I have there, but we'll worry about that later in the process. Like I said, today we want to focus on these tree branches here. I want to add foliage here, here, and give us a good foreground that looks more detailed and realistic. In the background, it won't matter as much as long as your foreground is more vivid. That's kind of how your eyes see too. When you look at something that's closer up to you, if I focus on something right here in front of me on this table, the things in the background kind of blend together. So you can use that knowledge of the human eye and how we perceive things to choose how we paint, the application that we're doing. And this other more disgusting looking palette, sorry, my palettes are not super clean. I'm not one of those kind of people. I've been reusing these, putting cellophane down on them at night, just pushing the cellophane on them to keep them wet. Some of these aren't even wet anymore, like that's just dried. But as you saw, I already had some of that in another palette. The ones that I will be using here is this leaf green, and this sunny day yellow, and I'll probably be using a little bit of this titanium white. On the last one, I have a palette that I was using last night. You can see my color mixing here. This just has some light brown, some yellow ochre, I have some neutral gray, titanium white, and this is a mixture of that heavy-bodied acrylic from Golden and also a little bit of this Master's Touch that comes from Hobby Lobby. It isn't very expensive, but it's actually quite opaque and good smooth texture. I like it. And then just a mixture of ivory black here and some lamp black. I had a little bit of a lamp black that I need to get rid of, so I've been mixing it in slowly. I'm finally out of it, so this is all going to be that last bit of that mixture. All right, and with that, I also have been using this acrylic flow medium. For anyone who doesn't paint, if you're trying to sit down and just paint with acrylics, you might notice that some of your things won't apply in the same way that you'll see other people when they're using it. That's because they're using mediums such as this flow medium. Just a little touch of this I have sitting in one of these trays, and it looks like a little opaque, almost milk colored liquid, and that just reduces the flow of the or the drying time of your acrylic paints. You mix that in there. You can also get it to apply really easy. The liquid will apply on top very smoothly. The problem is that it also won't be super opaque, so you might have to apply layer after layer after layer. So with that, I think we're ready to move in. I'm going to grab first here, I'm just going to go in and start blocking in the darker colors of the foliage. When you're thinking about looking at a three-dimensional scene in 2 dimensions, often the thing we don't realize when we're looking at these images is that there is a back to forward. If you want to give that same imagery and that same effect of looking into the depth of something, you often will have to paint things that you're not really seeing with your eye. So with that being said, I'm going to take a little bit of water here. Ooh, this brush is a little tough. I'm going to try to, I used it last job. A little bit of water there on this. And then I'm going to add a little bit of that liquid medium. And I'm just putting it on top of this brown because the color that I'm making here is going to be pretty dark. So if any of that does leak up amidst all this rubbing, it's not really going to affect it too much. So we're going for a darker color here. I'm going to grab this palette knife right here. I'm going to say we're going to start off with some of this phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is a really interesting color. It's blue tone green. And this is an older Liquitex bottle that I've had sitting around for a while. Liquitex Basics. I mean, I would say that this paint is probably 7 years old, so it's not mixing very good. I'm going to have to work on it a little bit. But I wanted to get rid of some of these older colors. That way I can start to refurbish my color palette anyways. I'm also going to take a little bit of this medium green here, add a little bit to that palette as well, and just put them right next to each other there. Then I'm going to grab, let's see, I'm going to grab this, what was a flat brush, but it had gotten really torn up with my horrible not cleaning my brushes. I'm trying to get better at that. I've actually been making that part of my goals amidst doing this painting. Not only do I have artistic goals, but I have goals about myself that I've put into this painting as well. I know how I kept up with the room that I'm using, how I kept up with the things around me. You can thank my significant other for that. She helped me realize the other day that I might be a little dirtier than I had expected around this place. So I'm going to hit that water again, tap that liquid, and I'm just going to start mixing a little bit of those two together. And you'll notice quickly that it's a lot lighter than you had expected. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of this black and darken that down a little bit. A little bit more of that black. And maybe even a dab of this yellow ochre in here. Just a little dab of the yellow ochre. All right. Now I'm going to bring it off to the side and drag through some more of that phthalo green. And now you can see that's actually just a deep green. When I damaged this brush, I went in with a straight edge. I don't know if you're able to see it, and just cut open the, or tried to peel out a lot of the latex, and it gives me a very interesting texture that I can use to apply these sorts of tops. So I'm going to start hitting this brush just kind of indiscriminately, but around the edges of each one of these branches that I've put in here. And I don't know if you can tell, but the kind of pattern that this brush is leaving me here is interesting. And if I'm just tapping it here, it gives a little bit of like a broken pattern that's perfect for these tree branches, in my opinion. All right. Got some leaves there. Let's do a couple more on this bottom one. Yeah, just overlaying that rock a little bit. I like that. All right, and then we're going to move up a little bit. We're going to start working on this branch right here. Now, these are all, I'm thinking of them as just leaves with no definition. If I were to take all the color away, fade out all the contrast and saturation, and just look at it like a black and white painting without any lines, what would these tree sections look like? A little bit more water here. Oop, there's a lot of water in there. Might have to be a little quick with these ones. This might be a little less opaque. I might have to go over that one again. I wet it down a little much. I'm just leaving little pieces where the branches highlights kind of stick through, being aware that, you know, you're not going to be able to see all of those from a distance, but with a little bit of a closer inspection of the painting, you'd notice there's branches and stuff coming through there. All right, some up there. Beautiful, I like it. I'm also imagining that there are little branches here that I can't necessarily see. All right. I got a lot of liquid in that last one, so I'm having to apply quite a bit of that green mixture to give it some opacity. And as you're seeing, because it's so I guess it lacks opacity, you can kind of see the trees through these dark ones here, and I'm unfortunately unable to zoom in so that you're able to see better. But I'm going to grab a little bit more of that medium green, hit that phthalo, a little bit more of that black. I'm going to start me a secondary pile because that got a little bit crazy there for a minute. A little too wet for me. All right, let's try this again. Oh yeah, that's more what I'm looking for. Okay, just breaking up the light patterns and the tree patterns behind it. Yeah, it's beautiful. I think I might even go over here right next to this trunk and add some in here. And it will be almost as if a branch is coming around in front of the tree. You'll be able to see that. I'll add that in there too. I like that idea. Maybe some branch up in here. A little bit of that water. All right, it's starting to come together here. I like the way it's pooling. Now, before I go in here and start applying more stuff on top, I want to work on this trunk a little bit more. And I know you're like, well, we just started applying leaves. And that's true. Very astute observation. But I'm going to let this dry a little bit. So as I'm working on this color here, bringing that color out, you can see how liquid this top is. It's just moving around a lot. But we're starting to get that darker foliage coming through. I really think it turned out phenomenal for just an underpainting. It's giving me enough texture to see leaves coming out of the imagination. And that's the thing, it's really about decision making. It's not like I know what leaves I'm painting. I'm not even using a reference photo for this. I've looked at a couple of different pictures of streams and some videos from Michael James Smith and Mural Joe, some other YouTubers, and I've been referencing them from time to time when I feel stuck. This morning I caught a new video from Ralphie and Klee. If you're familiar with their YouTube channel, they're artists as well. They were talking about what they call fa-chunking, which is basically just compartmentalization. Looking at your goal that you have ahead of you and looking at it as tiny little chunks. Let me hit a little bit of this burnt umber. Excuse me, not burnt umber, but the yellow ochre. Hit a little yellow ochre in here. Hit some of this different contrast. And this is just blocking in. This isn't anything super important. You just want to get it solid and make sure you don't have anything from the background coming through. You want to also, maybe you're seeing too much variation in your color. Don't be worried about the variation. The variation is actually going to be beneficial in the long run. It gives the look of multiple layers of color. Beautiful. I think that looks great. You know, I've dreamt about this painting for a while too. It's I was inspired by a couple different things I had seen, but this is also a very vivid memory in my head. I actually remember going to with my father fishing at this location. I've definitely embellished it and made it look a little nicer than it was, but it's in North Georgia. It's a fishing spot that we would go to look for catfish and largemouth bass. Usually you were just catching crappie though. But it was fun. It was the experience of being out there, especially with your father. And like I said, I was reflecting on my dad this week. He passed away in 2005. And it's amazing to me how fast the time has gone. I think about him all the time. He was the inspiration for me to continue painting. He was the inspiration for me to start a YouTube channel. In some way, he was the biggest, I guess you would call it, mentor I could ask for. I wouldn't want to call a parent a mentor, but you know, he parented very well. Maybe some people would see it from the outside and question some of the things that they had seen and heard, but he was a man of integrity and a man who knew what he stood for. So even if other people couldn't understand why, he could explain to you why he felt the way he did. So I'm adding in just a little bit of this burnt sienna light brown color. And I'm only dabbing this around where I think there might be a little bit of branch sticking through. And I think at that point we can hold off on the rest of that tree foliage there. And I think we're going to move on and start looking at the bark at the bottom of this tree. As you can tell, I've put in about 4 or 5 layers around the base of this already. Even in the video that you may have seen on my Instagram or Twitter, I was doing the underpainting of what you're seeing right here. So what I'm going to do here is I need to replicate, this brown color, and I need to add just a little brighter highlights in certain spots. For that, I'm using a 0.5 fine brush tip. I'm going to actually just put that behind my ear for a second and use a palette knife here to get my color started. I'm going to start off with a little bit of yellow ochre. This yellow ochre over here. Then I'm going to take some of this light brown, this burnt sienna light brown color. Hit it right there. And then I think I'm going to take just a dab of this medium yellow from over here on this other side, and I'm just going to tap just a couple of taps of that right there. Alrighty, now if I take this palette knife here, sorry, I've got to clean that off a little bit. I'll just mix that together. Well, that yellow didn't do much to it. Let's throw a little bit of this lemon yellow in here. Oh yeah, that's more what I'm looking for. It's almost an orange color. The red inside of the burnt umber brings that out. All right. Now I'm going to take just a dab of this white over here. Well, let's do a little bit more than that. Let me grab a little bit more than that. We'll put it off to the side here. The reason I want to do that is because as I'm mixing this, I can actually take part of what I'm mixing here. Let me get this brush wet a little bit. Take a little bit of what I'm mixing here, move it over here, pull a little white through it, and then I can actually compare it to what I'm seeing on the palette and then on the painting, and decide if I want to move on from there. I think that's a pretty good color to start with. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom. Let's see, maybe not. Maybe I need a little wider. Yeah, I think we're going to go a little wider, guys. I'm going to add just a little bit of that liquid flow medium. I'm going to take the flow medium and add it to this, and just a little bit more of that white, because to be honest, this is kind of hopefully going to be my last layer on the bark outside of some maybe darker detailing between the pieces of bark. I'm going to start down here. Oh yeah, that's more what I'm looking for. A little pop here and there. And I'm not adding it to every piece of bark. That's not how a tree would work anyways. I'm choosing particular spots where I feel like if the light were to be coming down, like I said, in 3 dimensions from back behind there, what would actually catch the light? And if a piece of bark in the front catches a little bit of light, will that prevent the piece of bark behind it from catching light? So always trying to be aware. I just add a little more white to that. Titanium white. There we go. Hit the ridges. There we go. We'll pull that through. So what I was saying earlier, my father, part of the reason I even took the step to get on the internet here and try to put my artwork out there is because before my father had passed away, we had a lengthy and in-depth conversation kind of about what kinds of things he wanted to achieve in his life. I was in the process of growing up and moving out, and we had kind of been on awkward terms a little bit before then. And I was building that relationship again, gaining that trust, and seeing him for an adult man and growing up myself. He had invited me out to powwow for the Indian tribe, and I decided I would go with him. And that weekend he perished in a car accident. It was unforeseen and unpredicted. But we had that conversation on the way up there, and throughout the weekend we referenced it about the things he wanted to accomplish when I moved out to California, which was my plan at the time. I needed to grow up a little bit, and I didn't know it at the time, but growing up is a longer process than you're told as a kid. If you think that you're just going to wake up one day and be different and understand some greater knowledges about life, then you're sadly mistaken. I thought that myself. I thought that an adult was something different. You knew it was different. It was just not only the way of thinking, but the way of behavior, and it would just come easier. What I didn't realize is I wanted something to happen without the work of learning how to make it happen. But at that age, I didn't know that. The idea that my father might not be around for very long hadn't even really occurred to me. I mean, we all play it out as kids, like, what if my parents died? How would I handle it? Would I be in some Richie Rich situation? I'm going to seriously tell you I wasn't in that situation, but I really did grow up a lot that weekend, and some would just tell you that death has a way of doing that, which I would agree, I would imagine. I've been through it a few times. But also it's the ability to look back at my life and reflect on things that I've gone through. I'm going to move up onto the branch here too and add a little bit of highlights here and there where I know I'm not going to be applying any more foliage. I'm trying to just give some highlights here and there, bring that vividness of this branch out. A lot of people would say my father was a mammoth of a man or a mountain of a man. I didn't understand at that age that that was something he had fostered. That he wasn't always that way. That people make mistakes, do stupid things. He had made a decision in his life to become the man that he was. But I couldn't see that at the time. Alright, we're going to move up into the second portion of this tree. I'm trying to be aware here that light is going to be more direct on this side of the tree as the sun seems to be kind of high in the sky, maybe 2 in the afternoon, I would guess, probably about when we are now. And it won't light all the parts of the bark. So I'm trying to make particular decisions about where these highlights go on this bark. So we keep the realism, but are also aware that some of this stuff may need to be shaded later or worked on a little bit here and there. Just have to be willing to make the change. Which I think is a good segue back to what I was saying. My dad had plans and goals. He was in his 40s and, I guess as I've been in my 30s now for a little while, and I'm starting to approach my own 40-year-old mark, I've been thinking about that a lot. What that meant to him, what he put off because he had kids, because he had other goals, because he had things he needed to take care of. I didn't spend the time speaking to him to find out why he had chosen the things that he had, but all the same, I've tried to learn from that situation. Adding just a little more liquid, and I'm going to actually add a little more white to this paint, and we're going to go up this next level because I think it's going to actually have a little more direct light straight on it. So I was unsure at that age what the future held for me, as anybody would be. We all suffer from the fog of an indeterminate future. It's why we procrastinate. It's why we don't take advantage of the opportunities that we have. If we were to die tomorrow, would we be satisfied with the life that we've lived? With what we've done, with what was in front of us? I don't mean to be morose, and I know some of you may be, out at work or babysitting or go down that dark road, but this might be a little bit darker of a conversation today. Mortality is something we all have to face, and it is a learning curve for everyone. I'm going to hit some of these pieces of bark here on the outside of this branch, giving some definition to that branch and also trying to show how it's formed. I'm also going to maybe give it a little bit of a backlight on this back side. There you go. I like that. And it's starting to come together, guys. I've spent hours and hours of my life reflecting on that weekend. He was a happy man and a satisfied man that weekend. I don't think he feared what was happening to him. Maybe not in any way that I would identify as normal fear. He faced death like a warrior. And it is a hard thing to reflect on. But his way of teaching me as a child about what was important in life, how we can discern what's important and what needs to fall to the wayside as a distraction, was often by taking me out fishing. And that's how I got the inspiration for this. Remembering some conversations that we had had out in the woods, lures in the water, making crude jokes away from the ladies and the family. You know, I wouldn't change those things one single bit. They are some of the most memorable parts of my life and defined a lot of who I am. Showed me what value meant. I ended up losing my mother in 2010. She was 46, I want to say. And in some way, and I know this sounds bizarre, but having gone through the death of my father, in some ways prepares you for taking the hit of another death. When you've faced it and you've looked at it and realized you will breathe and be able to walk on and live your life, that is how you make the magnitude of a man. And I couldn't see that at the time. You know, I was a kid. I was 18 years old when my dad passed away. But we used to love going out here. This is kind of a composite of a couple different places. I used the Buford Dam in Buford, Georgia as part of the concept. The way the river bends around and comes to the spillway there kind of informed my layout. Weirdly enough, this painting as well became a lesson in humility to me. Something that would be a pleasure to share with my dad if he were here today. He would love to hear about stories where I've learned something. That way he could learn something as well, maybe. He was a wise man, and I didn't see it as much when he was around, and that bothered me for a decade. I felt burdened by what had happened to me. So I used that location and a little bit of photo reference and a place in the James River that I used to love to hang out. And I know that's gonna, make this more fictitious looking than anything. A lot of these stones are more like the James River. A lot of the color of the ground and such is more like North Georgia. But to me, the look, the image that I'm going for is not necessarily a real place. It's almost like a Thomas Kincaid painting. I don't know if anybody's aware of his work. He likes to paint. They called him the painter of light. He would paint these houses, cabins, cottages. They were always occupied, a light on in a window, smoke coming out of the chimney. And they weren't supposed to be real places. They're supposed to be a place away from the world, a place that feels super real, something we can all identify with, but also has that ephemeral quality of a heavenly place. And in some ways, I kind of wanted to shoot for that as well. Also, Thomas Kincaid is quite a character if you get a chance to study about his life. He got a little crazy in his last few years and left his wife, and like dude was a super Christian, like youth minister kind of thing before, and then started hanging out in Vegas and all kinds of stuff. It's an interesting story, but I still actually idolize the man in a lot of ways. He was a maverick in the art world. He really changed the way a lot of people see art without even knowing it, just because of his business sense. He was a businessman more than anything. Sorry guys, I see the chat, but it's quite a bit away. I'm focusing on this too. I appreciate everybody for being here. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're into art. T-Dubs, good to see you. So yeah, I think it's pretty good on this bark. I'm going to go one more layer. We're going to add a lot more of that titanium white. And we're going to take this up a notch. I'm even actually going to add a dot of this leaf green. Now I'm talking about just a tiny dot of the leaf green. You can't even really tell that there's any green in it on this camera. I'm going to add a little bit more of that lemon yellow too. Yeah, there we go. Now this is probably going to be this final layer of highlight on the bark. And a little bit of that liquid. And we should get a vivid pop now. Oh yeah, there we go. And I'm just choosing at random, being aware of my light source, where the best places are to place these bright lines. We don't want to do it too much. It'll become unrealistic and overly bright. But being aware of the light source is crucial, I think, when it comes to painting or drawing. Really, it's the act of rendering, no matter what you're doing. If you're rendering out something that's supposed to look three-dimensional in 2 dimensions, you have to be very conscientious of where your light is. Awesome, that's starting to look great, guys. I'm liking it. So this has been a labor project of love for me. I do plan on making a video about it too. I'm not like other YouTubers, excuse me. If you want more consistent videos, that's awesome and I appreciate it. I would love to be able to sustain myself off my artwork and YouTube and social media and not have to go to my day job, but unfortunately, I only get to do this mostly as a hobby for right now. But it's a passion. And that goes back, I guess, to what we were talking about with fathers. You know, I realized a couple years ago I was a door guy at a bar, wrestling drunk kids out of the bar in the middle of the night because people don't know how to behave. And I would come home and sketch in my sketchbook or watch some YouTube videos about painting or drawing and think about what I would like to do to get my mind clear to my day, and often that meant picking up a pencil or pen and getting drawing. One day I was drawing at work, slow day as a door guy, and a customer came up to me and he said, "Hey man, I'd give you a large chunk of money." Well, we won't go into details for that drawing. I said, "Wow, all right." And then he said, "I would give it to you, but I don't have it," which, you know, is always a letdown, but no surprise when you've been in the art game for a while. A lot of people like to play games like that. But it inspired me. And as he left, he said, "I don't understand why you're here being a door guy. You should be out drawing and painting." And I said, "Well, I hope to one day when I can afford to and make it my, you know, main income source or whatever." And he kind of laughed and walked away, and I thought about it that night, and it's plagued me ever since then. Why are you going to wait? You're going to end up just like your dad. Never have gone after your dreams. you're going to want to have and never did. I didn't want to be that person anymore. Not that it was a bad behavior in my father. He was doing what he had to and what he felt he had to as a father to take care of his family. He even started his own business one time. It didn't pan out, I think, in the way that he wanted it to, but he had gone after some of his goals. But he was so excited about getting back in shape and learning new hobbies and maybe going around and touring from powwow to powwow during powwow season. There was all kinds of things he talked about. And I was excited for him. When somebody actually has something in their heart that they're in love with and it comes through, you can't help but get excited for them. At least that's the way I am. Maybe I'm a little empathic, but this is looking good. Just continually just adding a dab of water, a dab of liquid into here. It's very light color at this point. I'm just keeping it liquid as I move things around. My dad was also a hard man, a strong man. Don't get it twisted. He served in the U.S. Navy. He was a boxer. He didn't put up with bullshit. For real. You could lie to a lot of people, but don't get caught lying to my dad. And I couldn't lie to myself. Because, unfortunately, it's easier to lie to your parents when they're living. Once they're dead, you're just lying to yourself. And if there's a God and a heaven and all that literal stuff that literalists want to believe, well, I ain't gonna go down that ship either. So I've decided to go after my dream, and this is all part of it, and I appreciate you guys being here. I know it's not the most exciting of subjects to sit there and listen, but there's something about the act of painting that is very reflective for me. I can't help but do it and think about how I've gotten to this place. The other day I was listening to a YouTube video where a guy was talking about understanding why it is that you do what you do. And sitting down here with the motivation of thinking about my father and where my life has gone and how I've gotten to where I am has really motivated me to work on this. It hasn't been easy every day. Sometimes you just don't want to sit down and paint. You don't have the motivation, or you're afraid you're going to mess something up, which is usually what I'm feeling. Oh, this is looking too good. I don't want to add anything to it and make it not good. But I have to recognize that that apprehension is just defensiveness and me avoiding things that I actually want to be involved in. I'm just turned away out of fear. So what I'm going to do here now is I want to take a little bit of this brown color. I'm just going to choose a spot where I have a little bit of a clear spotter on this palette. I'm just going to add a little bit of that dark brown. And then I'm going to add just the tiniest little bit of that black. I need to even find a spot that'll come up. A lot of this is drying really quickly. Here we go. There we go. A little black in here. That's like a light brown. Let's do that. You could probably get the same effect with a burnt umber, but I'm not going to get up to get a burnt umber. All right, I'm going to try to just fill in some of these little cracks around this bark. Now, what I try to remember is that the reason bark looks the way it does is because it would be like extra dry skin. You ever look at your skin and it's really dry and you can see the cracking valleys, looks like a desert floor. Well, effectively, that's what's going on with tree bark. The bark doesn't have anywhere to grow as the tree expands, and it starts to crack here and there in spots. Now, the closer to you the bark is, the more round and shapely it's going to appear. But the further it goes around the edge, it's going to become slimmer and slimmer, giving that look of reality. Just like the stones over here, this part, we want to do the same thing with the bark. So what I'm going to do here is go in with this black, and I'm actually, black, it's dark brown, I guess. I'm going to get a little bit more of that flow medium in there. I want this really liquid. I'll show you how liquid this is right now. Just put it on there, and it's really liquidy. And I'm just going to take and fill in some of these darker cracks on the back side of this tree and try to give some contrast between these different types of, or different portions of bark. Light isn't going to hit all of them in the same place, so got to keep it moving. Yeah, that's looking good. I like it. Yeah. Fantastic. So where was I with my dad? Don't want to bore anybody, but that is kind of why I'm doing this. So fucking deal with it, I guess. Yeah, he would use going out fishing as the means to communicate clearly. It takes off some of the pressure. If you got to talk about awkward stuff with your 14-year-old son, it's a lot easier to take him out, get him a yoo-hoo, a milkshake, and go cast a line than it is to, sit there and talk awkwardly about girls or whatever. He was the master of metaphor too. If he could use something in the environment where we currently were to better explain a situation than he would have to, then he's going to use it. I don't know if that comes from being Native American. That never really occurred to me until just now, but that was certainly part of going out and going fishing with him, was to see and learn these kinds of things. He's going to teach you to make a fire, and he's going to tell you why you should know how to make a fire. It's going to teach you to make a dwelling and why you should make a dwelling and how to protect yourself. I might get my pragmatism from him, I realize, as I'm sitting here. And I was blessed to have a strong male figure in my life. He was a great example. And, that doesn't always mean that he was the best. I hope people understand that you can see your parents as real people that make mistakes and do things that you wouldn't do yourself. Of course, you can't say much about it when you're a kid. You just bear the brunt of whatever. And I'm not saying it wasn't all great times. My parents were divorced, and let's say it wasn't the most peaceful home leading up to that. It got pretty crazy. But I also, even as a little kid, knew that was my dad. And my dad could be capable of a lot of things. I'm capable of a lot of things. Why wouldn't he be capable of a lot of things? And one of those things is changing. And he took that head on and became a great father. He taught me about self-reliance. He got me involved in Boy Scouts. Don't worry, my butthole's okay. we were actually, I am a big fan of Boy Scouts, and I'm kind of sad about how that's all gone down recently. But I understand why, and I'm fortunate not to have had the same experience other people have had. I just wish they could have had the experience I had, which was fantastic, and taught me a lot about growing up and being self-sufficient, not being a victim of everything around me. know, my father grew up in a family that had faced some things that I don't even really conceive of how it could have affected them accurately. There's no way I could. They grew up in a small town in the western part of Virginia on this piece of land that one of their forebears had basically kept as a reservation for the Indian tribe. And then some religious groups got involved and donated a chapel and some other things out there. But in the 1900s, the 1920s, there was a guy in Virginia, the Bureau Registrar of Statistics, who didn't care for Indian people and kind of went out on an attack against them. My dad had to go to another state in order to get Indian put on his military record because Virginia wouldn't let you do that, because according to the state of Virginia at that time, there were no Indians in Virginia. So yeah, they've been through some things that I haven't been through. I got to go to school in a normal school. My dad would not have been able to go to high school had my family not made the decision to move out to the eastern coast of Virginia. My grandmother didn't. A lot of people in those parts, you eventually start working on a farm or whatever. You have to grow up really quick. So I was fortunate. I see how things could have been different for me. And a lot of that was because sacrifices that my family had made, my father included in that. He chose in a similar way to move away from Virginia because of, the lifestyle and history he had in Virginia. Not that it was terrible there, but let's just say my mom could be a vindictive person. So I think we're pretty good there on the bark. I think that looks pretty vivid, guys. I think at this point, we might switch over back to these leaves and go on into the leaves a little bit. Some more detail. Now this is where it's going to get really fun. I'm using really small brushes here, and I know that this could be annoying to people who aren't familiar with realism. But this is going to be a lot of paint mixing and a lot of small strokes. So give me just 1 second. I'm going to stand up here and grab another palette. And a little glass of water. Nothing like mouth sounds. Mouth sounds. All right. Oh. Alrighty. Let me hit this thing again. Alrighty. Yeah, the yellows here are what I'm excited about. My colors. Ooh, let me kick my camera here. I don't even know if we're lined up. Let me move this back over here. Ooh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, the yellows in this palette are fun. I was initially going to do this with a bunch of greens, but I decided instead of doing the greens, I'm going to make my own green, which is a little bit harder to do, but gives me a little more control over what my colors look like. So I'm going to use this palette knife here, and I'm going to take some of this medium yellow, and I'm just going to plop some medium yellow on here, and some lemon yellow right there, and a huge chunk of this light cerulean right there. And I might go in and finish some more greens from actual greens, depending on what we get the look to look like. And then a little bit of this sunny day yellow I'm going to grab from over here and put that sunny day yellow there. That is great for highlights. I love the way the sunny day yellow comes through. Alrighty. Got my little brushes. Alright. So because we're working from back forward, I'm going to want to make lighter greens, or excuse me, a little bit of a lighter green. First off, I'm going to take some of this light cerulean blue, and that's a little bit of that yellow, all three of those yellows right there. I'm going to mix that in. And that green, maybe a little too aquatic looking for me. So what I'm going to do is grab a little bit of that medium green from that other palette and just dab me a little medium green there. There we go. I like that green. A little dab of that liquid. Oh yeah. And yeah, I think that's a good start. So what I'm going to do here is basically I want to go in, and I know it kind of sounds crappy, but you got to make every one of these little leaves. So I'm trying to be aware of where the sunlight's going to be, where I think it will show the most. And I'm just going to start making little dark marks. Now these are a little bit more concentrated than those bigger brush strokes that we were doing earlier. Oh, Trolita, I saw your comment. If you're still hanging around, yeah, it's not far from Smyrna. I used to live in between I-85 and Athens, Georgia. So I had hung out in Athens a lot when I was a teenager. I dated a girl out in Snellville and a girl in Duluth for a little while too. So yeah, Georgia's kind of a little bit of a home feeling for me too. I'm a Virginia boy, but I definitely am a Southerner. Ain't no way around that. Just a little bitty. I'm just making almost like two downward strokes, like little V's is what I'm basically making here. And some of the spots I don't think are actually going to get as much detail as other spots. So some of these I'm just putting a dot here and there to just give the implication of light. The implication. There we go. It's starting to look good. I'm enjoying this. So yeah, the inspiration for starting this YouTube, for going after my art dreams and just creating and seeing what comes of it, all of that really had to go back to my dad in that weekend. That could sound super, disgusting to someone who doesn't think I've healed, but boy, oh boy, I've healed. I just find that that moment in my life has given me a plethora of information to look back on and see and to observe how things can change and how you can see a different spot in or a similar spot in your life differently based on just your life experience. My experiences have shown me understandings about things that I went through years ago that I'm like, oh, now I suddenly understand that. So I reflect on it from time to time. What could I learn from there? What can I learn from that weekend? Am I wasting my time here? Whatever I've been given, I don't want to waste my time. And if I can be completely honest, I know as morose and fucking dark as that sounds, the reality is that all of us should think in some ways like that. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or even Nietzsche, but if you're a fan of philosophy, which I don't understand how anybody couldn't be, most of the people that aren't a fan of philosophy, I feel like, are running from something in their life. Because people don't know how to apply it, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to be condescending to people. But a lot of their teachings, Plato, Socrates, their advice on how to survive your life without ripping your hair out. And because I get that and I understand that, I'm unsure why other people wouldn't want to garner some sort of understanding from it. But alright, so I have added a little bit of that sunny day yellow and just a little bit of liquid and a little bit of water. I'm keeping this very light. Now we're going to go in here and we're going to start hitting the next layer of leaves. And now I'm starting to choose even more particularly where each one of these leaves is going to go, because at this point we're actually bringing out the next layer. There isn't a whole lot on top of this layer that's going to be actually adding to the volume of the tree itself. After this, it's going to be mostly highlighting the stuff that's already been applied. Anyhow, I realized that my life experience isn't everyone else's. I am absolutely fortunate to have had the father that I had. I didn't realize that at the time. I took advantage of it and was rude and ungrateful. And I guess all kids are to some extent. A little bit more of that liquid. But because I recognized that that was my behavior, because I could see that that is the way I was carrying myself, and I can see it clearly from where I stand now, I can choose not to act like that now. And that seems like a very simple thing to say, but in reality, it's difficult. It's difficult to be a person of character and integrity and a person who wants to progress in their life. It's a lot easier to just plug in and sit around and be lazy. Trust me, I will not excuse myself. There has been many a day that I could have been very much more productive, but instead I decided to sit around and watch Netflix or whatever, you know. My dad wasn't about that. We were kids. You had to work around the house or out of the house if you were able to work out of the house. And as soon as you were able to work out of the house, you were going to work out of the house. I worked under the table before I was of legal age. But I meant no harm in it. It was just, I knew I needed to work. And if I could find somebody who was going to pay me to do something, whether it was cutting grass or sweeping up something or whatever, I was going to do it. I was going to go be a participating member of society. Oh, lost my cigarette there. So as soon as I could work, I worked. And that's the way it was. And Dad wanted me to pitch in, and that's the way it works. And I would not change that one bit. I learned that stuff isn't free. You don't just get to buy Nikes or Vans or whatever with your paycheck if you have things to take care of. Of course, it's a hard lesson for every kid to learn, because we have more of a social understanding at the time. When you're children, you think you got to be cool. And if I were an adult, I would be able to afford shoes. But you quickly learn that that's not necessarily the truth either. And I had to go through those lessons just like any other kid. I had to do those things as well. And it wasn't fun. But I'm glad I had a father who made it a part of my life. So I didn't end up in my 40s like some people I know who are basically blaming the world for all their ills and still trying to siphon money off their parents whenever they can't take care of themselves. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time that you need to ask for help. I've been there. I mean, those days are somewhat gone for me now as we're sitting here discussing the death of my parents, but in reality, you know, that's part of the growing up process. Can't always lean on that. Just add a little bit more of that medium green to this, mixing in some of that sunny day yellow. I'm just remaking some more of the same hue, about the same hue. I'm just breaking these darker sections up with little dots and these little marks that look like leaves. Really coming together though. My father was a interactive father, and that's something else that I didn't understand at the time, couldn't see at the time, was such a blessing. So hard for me to see it at the time that my dad actually cared. I mean, I could see it in some ways. I had friends that were regular attendees of our house because my dad knew that they weren't getting cared for at their homes. And he would offer them dinner and bring over their brothers and sisters and that kind of thing. And I could see that he was always interested in everybody's well-being around him. People knew my dad cared about them. And I guess in some ways, when you see that that's what sticks with people after you're gone, you realize, well, what am I leaving to people? Well, at the time, I was leaving being a door guy who liked to party and hang out with trash people. And that's where I was living my life. And when I could see that, where I could admit to myself, that's what you're doing to yourself, bro. Once you realize that, you don't want to become that. You suddenly see what it is. Oh man, I've let myself become something I wouldn't hang out with years ago. I wouldn't have been this person's friend. How did I become somebody that can't even be a friend to myself? I don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that. And we're just adding more and more around there. It's beautiful. Start to pull forward. Alrighty. Going up a little more water. Just hitting these little spots. Just breaking it up. I don't want to cover all the dark area. We want to use some of that darkness that's sitting there to inform our eyes that there are leaves behind it. So I'm trying to be very particular about where I'm putting all this, knowing that I need to convey that there's more information there. Really coming together though. If you've never been fishing, it is an interesting experience and something that you might think is just as simple as putting a lure and a line in the water and then you just pull up, and it's much more than that. I mean, you can definitely catch a fish that way if you went about that method. You might be fortunate to even catch a couple fish that way. But there's more to fishing than that. There's understanding breeding patterns and water temperature and time of day and food. Like, there's all sorts of things that go into fishing that people look over. And my dad would use that as an opportunity to teach you about your own well-being, about being a friend, about how you should treat the places that you go, about how to think about your money. You know, conservationism. He taught me about a lot of things out there in the woods that have become invaluable to me as an adult. Beautiful, beautiful. We're getting it in there. A little bit of water. Alrighty. And this is fantastic, guys. I'm loving the way this is coming out. I don't know how well you guys can see this. I might have to bring over the camera here in a minute. It's a little bit hard to see when you're building up these darker layers, especially from a distance, and I have some quite harsh lights on right now. But we're about to go in here as I'm reaching the top of the tree here. I'm going to lighten this up a little more. And hopefully, once I lighten it up, suddenly you'll be able to start seeing what I'm talking about. I'll pull those leaves out from the back and bring them forward. All right. I like it, guys. So what am I going to do for that? I'm going to add a lot of this Sunny Day Yellow here. Wow, we see how light that brought that in. We're going to hit that water, move that around in that palette. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to hit on top of some of these leaves, just randomly. You don't really need a whole lot, just to define what it is that you're looking at. You know what? I might actually hit a little bit of white, just a dab of this titanium white. I'm talking about just the end of a tip here. I'm going to hit that in there. I'm going to hit that liquid. There we go. Yeah, that might be a little more vivid there. No, I might even need a little more. I'm going to take a dab of this leaf green that I have on this other palette. We'll make this color work here, guys. I'm going to spin that in there. A little more of this white. Yeah. Let's see. Now we'll put this color next to it. Let's see. Yeah, I think this might be the option. There we go. All right, we'll start down here at the bottom. We're just going to hit tops of some of these leaves. All right, there you go. Yeah, and sitting out there, you know, sometimes I didn't feel like drawing. I mean, I was kind of a bitch kid. I didn't realize how much of it was just my mentality, but I was definitely kind of annoying and stuff. I would go fishing with my dad, and I'd want to sit around and draw. Let me draw this tree. Let me draw what I'm seeing here. But he never cared. As long as I was out there spending time with him, it didn't matter. And I didn't see that either, you know. Okay, Dad, I'll go out. I ain't like I got anything else to do, sit around the house. At least I don't have to sit around here and do chores all day, you know. Especially if you're like a 3-day weekend or something from school. Just a little bit there, a little bit there. Starting to pop forward. I like it. All right, let's hit a little bit on this back. Just dot there, dot there. Oh. It's a lot of patience. Now, patience is one of those things that I don't know if I'm just naturally a patient person or I've just learned over time how to be a patient person. Maybe the painting has helped me with that over the years of my life. But patience is key to painting and to a lot of other things in life. You have to be willing to sit and wait, because things don't always happen in our own time. We have to realize that what we can control is very little. When I'm painting, I feel like I have more control of my world. Maybe that's psychologically a little eye-opening to some people, but it's the reality of it is that we don't get to control everything that happens to us. I don't get to control whether or not my dad comes home from the hospital. Instead, I will sit here and reflect on what God's handed out to me and see what lessons there are to learn. In the same way with painting, you make mistakes. When I initially started this painting, the horizon line on this side turned out very poor. It was bent, and it made this seem like it had a fisheye effect on it. My fiance comes in here and she's looking at it, and I asked her about what she thought about it, and she said, well, I don't know why it's in fisheye up at the top. How do you plan to do that? And I got frustrated and defensive, just like I would have when I was young. What do you mean? In my head, I was thinking to myself, look, man, you're not the one painting this. I'm the one painting this. Such a childish way to think, especially if I want to be a successful artist, I have to be able to take criticism. So I was like, well, what is it that you see? Well, it's, something. I don't know how to fix it. I just know I can see it. And boy, that makes it even harder for you. At least if you could point out what it is that you're seeing, I could work on it, but then I realized that's not her job as the observer. That's my job as the artist. So what I have to do, I have to look back and see, what is it that she's seeing? What is it that I don't have correct? What is it that's taking away from this entire thing? And I realized that this curved bank here, which was in my head makes sense because I'm seeing in 3 dimensions, it just warped the whole picture. So I had to go in and work in this back corner again, add in more trees, more darkness, change the bank. And it frustrated me because I knew it was 2 days of work, and I was just like, I've already been working on this for a week, and now I've got to turn around and work on this for 2 more days. Droney, angry. But she was right, and as soon as I started to fix it, man, I could immediately see the difference. I was impressed, quite frankly, that she was able to point out what she was as clearly and concisely as she was. Suddenly I realized I was the asshole. And I try to remind myself of that oftentimes, that if I'm frustrated with somebody, I could be the asshole. Nobody wants to be the asshole, but somebody's got to be in every situation, or every confrontation, I guess. I'm going to put a little bit of this lighter stuff right here. I like the contrast right up against that dark. I think it looks great. I'm going to hit some of this inner part. This is this lower branch. That's great. Some of that. I'm just choosing, like I said, random places. Live in a world now where a lot of people, I feel like, either weren't blessed with good male role models, or I don't know, I'm even beginning to think some of them might just be too mentally deficient to learn lessons. But I don't want to be a hateful person. I don't want to believe that people aren't capable. But if you've ever tried to talk to somebody about something that seems so clear and obvious, and it's like you're talking to a brick wall, it can be extremely frustrating. And I've gone through that many a times. Maybe I've gotten a little jaded here and there, but I try to be patient and recognize that maybe I'm not saying something correctly. Maybe I'm not expressing exactly what it is that I think that I'm expressing. Words are difficult. It's hard to communicate with people in any real meaningful way. You have to think about what you're saying. Think about the words that you choose. People don't want to think about those sorts of things. It's easier just to spout whatever comes to your head. I mean, in some ways, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But I came in here with an intent and an understanding of what I wanted to talk about too. So most of my linguistic problems are just the fact that I can't talk correctly. So I'm going in again. We're just doing each one of these rows with a little bit of this green, just moving it around in indiscriminate ways, just tiny little motions, basically painting every individual leaf. Oh yeah. It turns out pretty cool. You just have to be patient. And if it doesn't turn out the way that you expected it to, that's when the humility part comes in. That's when you have to suck it up and say, you know what? I might be incorrect. I might need to re-examine my plan of action. It's a hard thing to do, but that's the man thing to do. That's the taking responsibility for your life part. I could easily blame it on something else. Oh, it's my paintbrushes. It's the cheap Walmart canvas. It's the fact that I don't have time and I'm rushed. It's the fact that others want it done this way, or I think it should be done this way. Like, all of that's not important. I'm just defensive and taking no credit or no responsibility for the things that I have to take responsibility for. It's a hard lesson to learn. Acrylics is an interesting medium as well. They dry in a very fast amount of time compared to oils. I mean, oils can take months and months, sometimes years to cure and dry completely. I don't have any experience with oils though. I've been too chicken shit to try them. And I don't want to be that, you know? But they're expensive too, so I've kind of put them on a back burner until I can afford them. But I'm just patient. I move along, one leaf at a time, being aware of every motion I make, trying to make a decision on what is the best. They seem to be working pretty well though. some of these parts I'm not even choosing to make an entirely new leaf. I'm actually just kind of highlighting a darker tone that might be there, or a additional tone that might be laid in where the paint wasn't quite mixed, using the natural terrain of the colors to inform the decisions that I make. Yeah, it's turned out great. I'm pretty excited about that, guys. And my father wasn't an artistic person like me. He did sing, but the fine arts wasn't something he was necessarily into. He was a great singer and inspired me to sing as well, although my voice is not what it used to be, as we can all tell. But he saw my passion for drawing, and he encouraged me in that. To a young boy who's looking for understanding and for some sort of place in the world, to have your father say, "Hey man, you're really good. You should keep doing that." It inspires you. And I was blessed to have that. We argued from time to time, didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. There was a time in my life where I was a stubborn Democrat. And then I became a lefty idiot in my teenage years. Didn't see what I was saying, didn't even hear the words that were coming out of my mouth. And then one day it was like I awoke from a dream. I had been contemplating on what to do with my living situation at the time. I was living with two other roommates, a friend of mine, and he was kind of in and out of the house, and then a friend of mine who heard I had gone on in the lease. And it sucked living with her. It probably would have been a lot more difficult to leave had we been romantically inclined, but we weren't. And that made it a little bit easier for me to just be like, this isn't working for me anymore. And once it occurred to me that I was the source of most of my problems, boy, how that changes the way you see the world. I couldn't run from it anymore. I could see what I had done, how I had gotten in the places that I had gotten. And I wasn't going to lie to myself about that. Alright, I have one more section of this foliage with this level of green. And then I'll be going in with a little bit even lighter of a green. I know in your head you're thinking, really? You still making leaves? Yeah. Yeah. I am indeed. A little bit of this. A little bit of that. It's like a recipe. Just mix, mix, mix till you get the color you're looking for. You know, you can really mess up some eggs if you don't know how to cook eggs, but painting, it's a little bit more difficult to mess up. You just look at the colors, match them as close as you can, and actually, when you're doing realism, them looking exactly matched all over the artwork is actually going to flatten it out. Reality is that colors don't always match as much as we perceive them to match. It's the diversity of color which brings realism, which draws in the eye. So trying to control every bit of what is seen is just not going to be effective for painting. Painting almost is subjective even down to the stroke. Alrighty. Awesome. So I have one more layer I think we're going to put on top of these leaves here. Try to bring out the vividness of those leaves. And I think I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to play some music. And feel free to sit and listen to some music. But I think I hear my cat whining in the other room too to get in the from our backyard. So I have to go get him. I will leave you guys right here. Let that dry just a second. And I'll be right back with you soon. Stay tuned. Alrighty, folks. Give me a second to just clip my mic back on here. Alrighty. We're going to go in here. We're going to do some light leaves on top of this tree branches, and I think we're going to call it a day today. I didn't realize we were already at 3:45. ROTC starts in 15 minutes, guys, and I don't want to hold you guys up. If you would like to head over and watch ROTC, so I'm going to just jump right back in here, and we'll work on these light top leaves, and we'll get you out of here. I appreciate everybody stopping by today and helping me make this live stream possible. Whoa. Alrighty, let's get back down into this. I'm going to grab a smaller brush, even smaller. This is a 1/10 of an inch brush. And I'm going to get into this green here that we were just working with, but I'm going to throw just a dab of that white in there. Oh, give me some of this white. Oh, looks like my white is thickening up. It might be drying up on me. All right, we'll do a drop of this Master's Touch Acrylico. All right. Well, throw that right in the floor. I'm going to take just a dab of that. We'll throw that over here. I'm going to grab some of that leaf green. Throw it right up on top of this. A little bit of this yellow, medium yellow. A little bit of this lemon yellow. Just the tiniest bit of that lemon yellow. All right. And I'm going to dip this in some liquid medium here, and we're just going to mix that around. Oh yeah, and I'm going to take a little bit more of that white. Oh yeah, that's got a nice leafy green color there. Yeah, all right. I'm going to hit that with a little bit more of that liquid medium. Thin it out a little more. Maybe even just a dot more. All right. Let's get back into these leaves. I'm going to wrap up my final thoughts too about fatherhood, about my dad and my inspiration to paint too. First, before you guys go running off to ROTC, make sure to like this video. Subscribe if you like the content that I make. I make some awesome videos, but they're less talking, less from me, more just watching me create. If you like the things that I create, feel free to share them with somebody who might be interested in them, guys. I appreciate every one of you for coming out. Don't forget, you can find me on Instagram at the Charles Hancock Art. You can find me on Facebook at Charles Hancock Creations, on YouTube at Charles Hancock Creations, and at Twitter at C Hancock Art. No, excuse me. Twitter is CHC Art. There you go. That's my plugs there. Please do like and subscribe. Like I said, I'm tired of working for the man and I want to go after my dreams. So if you can make that happen, that would be awesome. And join the family. I'm always also looking to help out anybody who, you know, is looking for some help with their channel or whatever. And I'm also willing to work with them, helping me out with something they can help me out. Why not be mutually beneficial? I'm going to hit some more of that liquid medium in here and just hitting the edge of these these leaves here. Just bringing the green right to the surface. I mean, pops of green. At this point, we're putting in those last details on some of these leaves. We can even put little dots randomly in the background to give a push through of light or whatever that's coming through on those back leaves. Bam, bam, looks great. That's really coming through. I love the way it's looking. I'm gonna pull some of this green down here into these bottom leaves because they're definitely going to be seeing some sun too. And they're right above that rock, so it gives it a little bit of contrast to show that that is in fact tree branch hanging over that rock. Don't be afraid about the variance of color. You just don't want to make it out of control or too extreme. Just lightly, a little bit here, a little bit there. I've only been doing this for a little bit of time. It just takes some practice and looking at YouTube videos and things like that. And finally, I just want to say, I appreciate, again, everybody being here. My hope is that I'll be able to wrap this up in the next week or two and start editing together a video about this and about maybe fatherhood. Maybe I'll add a little more dialogue into it. We'll see. I've been told that some people would prefer to hear more of my voice and less of the other things that I put in the background music and sound effects and such. So maybe I'll consider that as a possibility in the next video. I myself am not a father. I understand how crucial and important a father is. And I don't know if my partner and I will end up having a kid or not, but if I decide I need to be a father and I think that, I'd be good at it, which I do, we may adopt or something at some point. But in the turmoil of the world that we live in currently and the stuff that I see going on around me, I can't help but see that some of these people need a good male role model in their lives. Whether it was an uncle or a teacher or a father figure. A lot of the distress that I see, I feel like would be remedied if people just had a better grasp of life. And a lot of that comes from having parents who care and are around. And I'm blessed to have had that. I hope all of you are able to see the clarity of your situation. If you have your parents around, cherish them. Maybe give them a call today, hit them up. That's something I always think I would love to do, is just be able to pick up the phone and call my parents. So take advantage of that if you have that time today. And reach out. They would love to hear from you, no doubt. I think I'm going to let you guys go as ROTC is about to start here. I appreciate all the time and all the listening pleasure. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll catch up with you guys soon. God bless. Go out in the world, create something awesome. That's what I got to do.